Hi, this is Brent, and today I want to cover the next chapter in the Swift UI section of the Develop in Swift tutorials from Apple. If you scroll down, one thing I noticed, just in the past couple of days, they actually added another section. That one is about app design. I'll cover that later as we go through these tutorials, but for now, we're going to jump down to the Swift UI. And specifically, we're looking at Chapter 2, Views, Structures, and Properties. And we'll do the Customize Views with Properties tutorial. All right, we want to go ahead and open Xcode. And let's create a new project. Make sure we select iOS and App, and then choose Next. And here we're going to call this Weather Forecast. From here, we're selecting everything Swift UI and Swift. We're not worrying about testing or storage. Go ahead and choose Next. Then we'll give this location, and we don't need to worry about Git repo at this moment. Go ahead and click Create. First thing we want to do is within the VStack, let's go ahead and select this text and we'll delete it. And we're going to type a new text view, and we're going to put some text. We'll call this Monday, M-O-N for Monday. And then we'll do another text, and we'll call this high, and then 70. And then a third text view, we'll call this low of 50. So in our preview, you can see kind of this prototype of what we have here. All right, we want to next add an image. So below the Monday text, go ahead and type image, and then we're going to reference system name. And from here, we're going to pass in a string. And in this case, we're going to pass in sun.max.fill. Now the question is, how do you know what icons, what system icons you can reference? Well, if you open the library, and the best way to find that is under View and Show Library, you'll notice over here we've got our list of views. We've got some other items here, and on this far right, we have one called Symbols. Here you have all the various symbols that are available within iOS that you can then reference. And so you could start searching, and you could find ones that have reference to sun, and there's a whole host of images. But basically what you're doing is you can scroll through and see what they look like and figure out. Notice whenever it has text that says .fill, notice the difference between the regular one and the one that says .fill is that it's got more of a filled in color for a background on the image. So you can certainly explore and find images that you want to use here. We'll go ahead and press escape because we already entered the one that we want. Next, let's add some modifiers so that we can change the behavior of this image. And so we press return, and then we press dot, and we want foreground style. And in our case, we want color dot yellow, and notice immediately the image changed to a color of yellow. So the foreground style is a modifier that will set a color on the object, and so in this case it's an image, and it sets that color for us. You could even do the same thing if you were doing like foreground style and then color dot yellow on the text. It would change the color of the text. So it's a pretty powerful modifier. Let's go ahead and undo that. In our layout, we want to be able to show multiple of these forecasts. So this text and image combined would be one forecast. And if we want to show multiple forecasts next to each other, then we can embed this in another stack called an H stack or horizontal stack. One way to do that is to select the V stack and to right click and choose Embed. and then it automatically adds another container around it, and from here we just type hstack, press return. Now you'll notice nothing changed because at the moment this is just a container and there's only one element. So now what we want to do is copy the entire vstack, including the padding. In fact, we want to make sure. So if you're unsure of how much, where the container ends, if you click on one of the curly braces, it'll highlight the other curly brace for you. So I'm going to just click and drag, and I want to include that. So now I'm going to press Command C to copy, and then I'll give myself some space and then paste it. And so now we've got two of these vstacks lined up horizontally next to each other. We want to organize our code a little better so that instead of typing this out every time we want to have an extra forecast, what we want to do is create what's called a subview. And a subview is basically another view that we can reference by name, and then we can have it listed in code so that you could type one line of code to represent all of this as a subview. Now, in the tutorial, it references, clicking here and then saying extract subview. The problem is that, again, the tutorial references an older version of Xcode, and in the latest Xcode 26, there is no extract subview. If you want, you could extract its selection to a file, but we're not going to worry about that right now. So at the moment, the best thing we can do is come down here and type out what that subview looks like, and then just copy and paste it for us. So we can place this subview pretty much anywhere outside of the content view. So following along with the tutorial, we're going to type struct, and then we'll call this day forecast, and then colon view, and then open curly brace, and then from here we want to say var body sum view, and then add another container. And so now what we've done is we've created another view. If you look up here, notice we have the content view, and it is a type of view, and then here we have the body, which is required. So this information is required. So now this can be rendered in SwiftUI as a view. So what we're doing now is taking this text, this vstack, including the padding. We can press Command X and then come down here and paste it. And then here, back where the text used to be, we can just reference day forecast with open and close parentheses. And notice that it put it back. And so right now what you have is, here is the subview, and we're referencing it there. And that's what this first one is. And then we have this all written out, but we can go ahead and delete that and type day forecast again. And now you have the view listed twice. So what we've done is we've created a subview called day forecast, and then we create an instance of day forecast, and we've created one instance here and one instance there. At the moment, this is very hard-coded, meaning the text is hard-coded, and when you instantiate the day forecast, it's just duplicating the information. So what we want is to generalize this, where we can pass information into this struct so that you can have a unique value for each day forecast instance. So the first thing we'll do is within the day forecast, just after that first curly brace, let's enter a line and type let day string. So we've added a property called day, and you're going to notice that it's going to throw some errors. We're going to fix that in a second, but we just want to pay attention to the fact that we've now added a property on this struct. When we create this property, we've used the let keyword, and that declares it as a property. And then we have the name, and then a colon, and then we have the type. So what we're doing is we created a property that is called day, and the type is a string. In Swift, you can have a lot of different types within your properties, and we'll see that in a few of these. But just be aware that when we're creating a property, it has a type associated with it. And in our case, we've declared this as property as day, and it's a type of string. Let's take a look at this error and see what it says. If I click on it, notice it says missing argument for parameter day in call. And so what's happening is whenever you have a property on a struct and then you instantiate that struct, you need to pass in the value for those properties. So it's saying it's missing. Whenever you instantiate it, it needs to be fixed. So here we can go ahead and click apply, and now it's added that to the property. And so at this point, we can click on here and change that to MON for Monday. And then notice the same thing's happening for this instance. And so let's go ahead and apply the fix. And then here we'll type a string and we'll call this TUE for Tuesday. You'll notice that over here in the preview, nothing has changed yet. And the reason for that is we have this property, but we're actually not using that value in the view. So obviously you can see where this is going, but if you look down here, we have this text view, and it currently has a hard-coded string. So if we change that and we say day, then all of a sudden the view updates, and now you'll see that the preview shows Monday and then Tuesday. So you can see how we've generalized this day forecast struct so that we can pass in information and it updates it in the view. So we've done this, we've generalized it for the text for day. Now let's do the same thing. In our case, we need to add a property to represent the high and low temperature. Go ahead under the let day property. Let's go ahead and type another one called let high, and then call that, this is of type int, which is a number, integer. And then we're going to say let low and pass that in also as an int. So again, now the error shows up because we have additional properties. We need to pass those properties in when we instantiate this day forecast. So if you click here, it's showing that high and low is needed. Now it's not fixing it for us automatically, but we know that we can then pass in the information ourselves. If you click here after the quote, you type the comma, and then we say high, and here we'll pass in a value. We'll call this 70, and then we add a comma, and then we say low. Now we pass in a value. We'll say 50. Notice that the error goes away for this one, but now we have the error on the second one. And so we'll do the same thing. So again, comma, and then high. And then we'll give this, we can give this a different value, say 60, and then low, and we'll give this a different value of 40. So now we've fixed the error. Notice that the preview still shows an error, but if you click the refresh button, then it goes away. Sometimes Xcode will do this where you're going along and you get an error and you'll see it in the code editor, but then sometimes you'll have an error that shows up in the preview, but it's not going away automatically. So just be aware of that. It happens, especially I've noticed when you're working in the code and you're not fixing the errors very quickly, then basically when the code editor has a lot of errors, the preview stops trying to update it automatically. and it basically is waiting for you to finish fixing the code, and then you can just click that refresh button. So now we need to get the values from the high and low to show up in our text views. Now, you could, if you were thinking, oh, well, all I need to do is pass in high and then pass in low, that it would show up. Well, notice that you get an error here, and when you click on that, it's got a whole bunch of stuff, and it's throwing a bunch of errors, and it's what it's doing is it's attempting to figure out if the value you've passed in matches one of the expected parameters that exist for the text view. The text view expects certain types of values. It does not work. It's not expecting an integer. So here you're passing in high, which is a type of int, and it doesn't know what to do with it. So we use what we call string interpolation, and it's a nice big word that I can hardly pronounce, but string interpolation. Goodness. String interpolation. You read it all the time, but you don't say it very often. What we will do is there's a shortcut to enclose the integer so that it will be rendered as text. And you do that by in front of the parameter name, you're going to add a quote, and then you're going to do a backslash and then an open parentheses. Now, notice it automatically filled in the quote, it added that second. I want to delete that and then go to the end and then put a closing parentheses and then a closing quotation. So now, all of a sudden, the error has gone away. But again, notice that what we've done is we've put quotation, backslash, open parentheses, and then closing parentheses and quotation. We can do the same thing here. Basically, again, when you start typing, it's going to want to help you figure it out, but I'm going to click the delete button so that I can enter the parentheses, and then I use the arrow keys, move over, and then add the closing parentheses and text. So now, notice that we've got the numbers showing up. So now we have the integers. We passed 70 and 50 and 60 and 40. So now they're showing up. When you use string interpolation, you can also add additional text within these quote marks. So I can go ahead and add back the prefix of high, and then I can also add low, and you can even be fancy and add a degree mark. So after the closing parentheses, I can you press Option and the number 0. Wait, press Option 0. And then it adds a little degree symbol. And so I can go ahead and press Option 0. And now it shows 70 degrees, 50 degrees, 60, and 40. Next, we want to add what we call a computed property, which means that based on certain information, the look and feel of the property will change how it looks and feels on the screen. So in our case, what we want is to set a property called isRainy. So after the day property, go ahead and press return and say let isRainy and set it to bool, B-O-O-L, which stands for Boolean. And Boolean means it's either true or false. Again, we're going to get an error. And so if we click up here, notice it prompts us. We can go ahead and click apply, and we can change that. And in our case, we want to set this to false, and then we have the same error on the next version, and we can click here and say true. Notice that the order of the properties is based on the order that it's shown in our struct. So you have to be aware that when you pass in the values, it's passed in based on this order. Let's go ahead next, and we're going to add the computed property, which we were going to call icon name. So if I type the word var and then icon name, and notice I have lowercase I, capital N. So icon name, and that's going to be of type string. And then I use an open curly brace, and then it gives us a closing curly brace. Notice we get an error, and it's saying, hey, this is returning, it's missing the return in the getter for property expected to return a type string. So in our case, we want to go ahead and type return, which is a keyword, and then a string. And in our case, we want to return a specific icon for when it's a specific icon name. In our case, it's cloud.rain.fill. So that takes care of the error. So again, the computed property is this right here. When we created the when we use let, that's a declared property. And so the declared property, the value is declared at the moment that you instantiate it up here. But a computed property doesn't have a value until it calculates the information based on other outside values. So notice that it uses the var keyword, and the var keyword means that this is a variable that can change. And it can change based on whatever code we put in here. So that's why we use the var keyword, and that means that it's also, we're treating it as a computed property because this value could change based on whatever code and logic we put in here. Where we want to use the icon name then is, of course, right here with the image, and so we can change that to icon name. Now notice what happens, it's actually showing two yellow rain clouds. So the reason for that is because we're not actually deciding what this value is. We're not changing the value. We're not computing the value. We're just kind of returning the string automatically. So if we want to set this up to where it reacts to what the value of is rainy, because is rainy is the Boolean, it's either true or false, then we want to return a certain image based on whether it is true or false. Let's come up here and start over with, we say if, then is rainy, and I just press tab to autocomplete. Then open curly brace, then we're going to return the cloud.rain.fill. And then I'm going to go down to after the curly brace, and I'm going to say else. And then open curly brace, we're going to return the sun.max.fill. Now you'll see that we get the right image based on whether it is rainy. One thing that the tutorial mentions is that you don't have to specifically indicate the return keyword. So it's implied that this is returned, and so you can actually, you don't have to use the return keyword in this case. It's up to you how you want to do it. I don't mind. For me, it just helps keep things organized. You know that it's a return value, but often you'll see the shortcut where it'll have an if statement, and then that's what it returns, or in the else statement, then it returns there. So just with like the icon, we change the icon based on the is rainy Boolean, but we can also change the color. So if I come down here and give myself some more room, I'm going to type var icon color, and it's going to return a type of color. And here we're going to say if is rainy, and we're going to say return color.blue. I'm kind of going quickly here, but again, you get the idea of using the the code completion. You can press tab, and then you get used to the, it ends up giving you the information that you need, color.yellow. and you press return when you want to accept whatever that autocomplete gives you. And then down here, in the foreground style, we want to select the icon color. And now we have blue rain clouds or a yellow sun. One other thing you can do that you'll see a lot is, because we don't need to explicitly say return, we also don't need to explicitly type the color. What happens is it's called type inference. So we know that this variable is of type color, and so that we know when we return something here or here, the type is color. So we don't have to explicitly type the keyword color dot blue. You just have to type dot blue. And you'll see that a lot in a lot of the code that's out there, where instead of explicitly typing every type of parameter that you pass in, there's that shortcut. And so that's because of type inference. Let's go ahead and add some additional modifiers so that we can make this a little more stylized. One we can do is, on a text view, you can change the font size, the font style. So we click here at the end of that text day, and then we press return, and then we type dot, and then we start typing the keyword font. And font is going to have a lot of choices. And if I press a dot, notice then you're going to be given a bunch of different options that you can pass in. And so you can experiment with this. There's headline, large title, call out, caption, default, footnote, all these various title font modifiers. In our case, we want to type headline. And so we type that, and notice that the text is a little more bold and perhaps a little larger. So that's the font modifier. You can even use font modifiers on images, because we're passing in an icon, a system icon, which is a type of text. And so you can even add modifiers to an image. So in our case, we can say dot font, and then we can say dot large title. And so again, notice that the image is much larger. So again, the font styles can be applied to images when you use these symbols, because the symbols are basically treated as text. On our other text views, we could use another modifier called font weight, and that will take font dot weight dot, and then you have a bunch of options. And so here you have different font weights that can change it, so you can certainly experiment with this. But for our case, we're going to say semi-bold. And we can add the same thing to the next one, dot font weight. And then again, because of type inference, we don't actually have to type all this font dot weight. We can just type dot semi-bold. And so notice we get the same thing. So I'm just going to clean this up a little. Type dot semi-bold. Again, feel free to experiment with the values, the different values that you can pass in, and see how it affects the text. We can also change we can change the color of the text. And for this low text, let's add dot foreground style. So it's the same principle that we did before, but in our case, instead of setting a specific color, we can set what is called secondary, which is style that's related to the theme of the app. So here we call it secondary, and notice that the font is, the color is a lighter shade, and it modifies it there. And we can also, on the image, we can add a little padding, dot padding, and then give it a number and gives a little more space. So you can experiment with that. You can change the padding, you can change the font style so that you can see what looks you can get in customizations for your forecast. So that's everything in the tutorial. Let's go ahead and take a look at the questions at the end of that tutorial. If we scroll down, again, feel free to read some of the additional information they talk about, explain a little bit more of how these things work. But if we all the way down to the bottom, let's check your understanding. All right, what code creates an instance of the following view? So we have a struct called person avatar, and notice that it has properties, name, image name, and color. So this is not going to work because you're missing the properties. You're not passing in the parameters for the required properties. Now this one here says name, image name, color. That looks right. Here, notice this one, it's passing in information, but you have to pass in the property name. There are ways to change that, but in this case, it requires it. So here, let's click submit. Perfect. You need to pass arguments for each of its properties. Next question. A property can have a value that changes based on other data. It's a little tricky question because a property can have a value that changes based on other data. We know that is true because you can have a computed property. Of course, it doesn't tell you what type of property, but yeah, we get it. All right, how do you insert values into a string? You use string interpolation. And that means you have a backslash, open parentheses, and a closing parentheses around your variables. So that one looks correct. These are not correct. Perfect. This is the escape sequence, inserts the value of its contents into a string. Great job. All right, well, thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.